What if gravity reversed direction for a day?
If gravity stopped working tomorrow, the world would be in chaos. Buildings would crumble to the ground, cars would fly off the road, and people would float away into the sky. But what if this happened for only one day? What would happen if gravity reversed its direction for just 24 hours? It might not be as bad as you think.
For the sake of argument, let's assume that Earth suddenly started pulling us towards space rather than down towards the ground.
The first thing we'd notice is that everything around us would start floating upwards. At first, this would be a spectacular sight to behold. Cars would be sailing through the air, birds would be gliding effortlessly, and people would be leaping high above buildings. It would feel like we were living in a fantasy world where anything was possible. But soon, the reality of our situation would start to sink in.
We couldn't stay in one place without being anchored to the ground or something.
And since nothing was designed to withstand an upward pull, we wouldn't have any shelter from the elements. As things floated away from us, they'd also start to break apart. Large objects like buildings and bridges would probably collapse as their foundations were no longer supporting them.
Trees would uproot themselves from the ground and float away, leaving behind barren landscapes.
People who were uncareful would find themselves torn apart by the wind as they tried to navigate this new environment. Even the air we breathe would become a hazard as it was filled with debris and dust.
Now, if this were to happen for just one day, the damage wouldn't be as catastrophic.
People could take cover in sturdy buildings and wait out the chaos until gravity returned to normal. But even so, there would still be some serious consequences.
The most immediate impact would be felt by those who were outside when the shift occurred.
People would need to take cover and protect their heads from falling objects like bricks and glass. There would also be a lot of confusion and panic as people tried to understand what was going on.
Without gravity, time would also stop working as we know it.
Clocks and watches would stop ticking, and calendars would become useless. This is because time is measured based on the rotation of the Earth on its axis. Without gravity, the Earth would not rotate properly, which means that our traditional methods of measuring time would cease to work. The effects of a day without gravity would extend beyond our planet. The Moon, which is held in orbit around the Earth by gravity, would start to drift away. If it managed to escape Earth's gravitational pull, the Moon would then hurtle into space and never return. This would have major implications for life on Earth as we know it. The Moon plays a vital role in regulating our planet's climate and tides. Without the Moon, Earth would become a very different and possibly uninhabitable place. Other celestial bodies would also be affected by the absence of gravity. Satellites that are used for communication and navigation would start to fall from the sky and crash into the Earth. Planes would lose altitude and begin plummeting to the ground. Even the International Space Station would be affected, and it would start to drift away from its orbit.
The animals around us would also be affected by the sudden change in gravity.
Birds would be unable to fly and would literally fall out of the sky. Fish would be gasping at the surface of the water trying to get more oxygen. And insects like ants would struggle to walk on the ground. As they were used to walking on a flat surface, plants would also suffer without gravity. Their stems would start to bend and their roots would become exposed to the air. Crops would wither and die, leading to widespread famine. The human body is not designed to function without gravity. Our muscles and bones are accustomed to the downward pull of gravity, which helps keep us strong and healthy. Without gravity, our bodies would start to weaken, and we would become more susceptible to illness and injury. Our organs would also be affected as they are not used to functioning in a weightless environment. The heart, for example, would have to work harder to pump blood throughout the body, which could lead to cardiovascular problems. The lack of gravity would also make it difficult to sleep as our bodies would be constantly floating. Our internal clocks would be off, making it hard to fall asleep at night and stay awake during the day. A day without gravity would be a scary and dangerous experience. People would need to be careful not to float away or get injured by falling objects. The world as we know it would be in chaos as buildings collapsed, roads buckled, and vehicles flew into the sky. But it could also be an exciting adventure. Imagine soaring through the air like a bird or walking on clouds. It would be a chance to see the world from a whole new perspective. But what if this day lasted longer? What if gravity stopped working forever? The consequences would be disastrous. Without gravity, The Earth would no longer be a planet, but rather a pile of rocks in space. All of the water, atmosphere, and other components that make Earth habitable would simply float away into outer space. The Earth would become a lifeless, barren rock, much like the many asteroids and meteoroids that populate our solar system. Humans would not be able to survive on Earth without gravity. Our bodies rely on the downward pull of gravity to keep us grounded and to help regulate our internal organs. Without gravity, we would be unable to walk, talk, or even think properly. The human race would become extinct. If gravity stopped working for just 1 hour, the world would still be in chaos. Roads would buckle, buildings would shake, and vehicles would skid off course. People would need to take cover and protect themselves from falling objects as cars and planes fell from the sky. It would be a scene of total havoc and destruction. But after an hour, the damage could be repaired and life could go back to normal. If gravity stopped working for 1 week, the world would descend into anarchy. Food supplies would run out, water would become scarce, and people would struggle to stay safe in a world without rules or order. The social fabric of society would break down, and the human race would be on the brink of extinction. If gravity stopped working forever, the universe itself would collapse into a giant singularity. Without gravity, matter would no longer be held together and would disintegrate into its basic components. Stars would go out, galaxies would collapse, and black holes would evaporate. The universe would become a void of nothingness. So let's just hope that gravity doesn't stop working anytime soon. But what if gravity didn't just stop working, but started working in reverse? If this happened for just 1 day, it would be absolute pandemonium. Everything we know about physics would be turned on its head as objects started falling upwards instead of downwards. The sun would fall out of the sky and crash into the Earth. Planets would abandon their orbits and fly away from the solar system. Atoms would lose their structure and fly apart. The very fabric of reality would be torn apart. This is because gravity is not just a force that brings things down. It's also a force that holds things together. It's what keeps planets in orbit around the sun. It's what holds atoms together to form molecules. If gravity were to reverse its direction, it would cause everything in the universe to fly apart. But if gravity only reversed its direction for 1 day, the effects would be less apocalyptic. Things would still be pretty bad, though. As soon as gravity started pulling us upwards instead of downwards, the ground beneath our feet would start to disappear. Buildings would crumble and roads would buckle as the Earth itself started to break apart. People would find themselves floating away into the sky, unless they were anchored to the ground by something solid. And once they were free from the shackles of Earth's gravity, people would start to explore their newfound freedom. They could soar through the skies like birds or swim in the clouds like dolphins. But this joy would soon turn to terror as people realized the danger of their situation. Without gravity, there was nothing to keep them on Earth. They could float all the way into space and never return. It would be a day of chaos and panic as people struggled to understand what was happening and how to survive in a world without gravity. But in the end, it would be a day of wonder and discovery. People would see the Earth from a whole new perspective and learn just how fragile our planet really is. It's hard to imagine what would happen if gravity reversed its direction. But one thing is certain, it would be a day that we would never forget. In the end, we can be thankful that gravity works the way it does. If it were any stronger, we would be crushed beneath its power. If it were any weaker, we would float away into space. But just right here on the Earth, we are perfectly balanced between the forces of gravity and freedom. We are free to move around and explore our world, but we are also grounded by the knowledge that we cannot float away into the sky. It's a perfect balance that allows us to live our lives in peace. So let us take a moment to appreciate the amazing planet we live on and the incredible forces that make it possible.